Thank you, Mr. Chair. A brief introduction to the bill, and then with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to go to those who are here in support or in places like Lamar in support. I think there were people on deck ready to go at 1:30, and they are patiently waiting to have their say. Okay. For those who have served on either the House or Senate Education Committee may have heard of organizations or companies such as EBSCO and Gale. For those of you who may not have served on Education Committee, those might be new to you. I first heard EBSCO about 2 years ago when I started receiving inquiry from constituents concerned about material that students were seeing through this portal. And my layperson understanding of this portal is that it is specifically designed for education research, and when a school provides this probably on hardware that is district owned or school owned, and they use the EBSCO or Gale portals. The idea is that this is better than setting kids out on the internet proper using something like Google or another search engine. And I know from my sons who are out of K through 12 now, they were given instructions or orders maybe not to use sites like Wikipedia to actually do research and go out and test theories and such. So parents came to me, and I'm sure other members of the education committees in the past, and expressed concerns that children were seeing things, advertising, not just articles, but images and advertising that are specifically inappropriate for minors. I appreciate the Colorado Department of Education and their representative, Jennifer Mello, over the past 2 years has been very accommodating and helping me understand what districts use EBSCO or Gale, I think, but specifically EBSCO, and which don't. I have had many conversations, not just on this subject, but others, explaining to parents probably who moved to Colorado from other states that our state constitution since 1876 has made it very clear that curriculum, what is taught, how it is taught, content, and budgeting are something that our Constitution reserves the authority to the school board, the school districts, and we have 178 of those in Colorado. Parents who come here from other states who have been involved in some statewide effort with their legislature in that other state find that a rather alien concept. A few years ago, or 2 years ago, I believe there was a group looking for standardized physical education standards statewide. An admirable goal. But as soon as I saw the advocacy materials for that, my reaction was, this is the wrong place to do that. You have to go sell that in Colorado in 178 different places because there are 178 school boards who make those decisions. So I have sent parents to talk to their school boards because we can't say no. A school district can't use EBSCO, or a library can't use EBSCO. Especially with school districts, we don't have the authority to do that. I want to, Mr. Chair, if I may, I have an article here, if staff might be able to run up and get this one. This is an article that talks about the Cherry Creek School District. They have dealt with EBSCO in the past, and I commend the school board there and their district leadership for deciding to not use EBSCO anymore. They've had this discussion with parents about inappropriate material being streamed through district hardware, district required software, EBSCO, this portal, and that kids in the district were able to access things that are inappropriate for their age.
So, Senator Holbert, would you explain what EBSCO is?
EBSCO is a company, and if you visit the EBSCO website, you will find, I believe, that they've been around since 1944. And I'm not here to disparage them. I hope that there's some way that they can make this not happen in their system. EBSCO, I believe, if you want to visit that website, very professionally done. Cherry Creek, if you read this article, as I understand, I don't know if there's a representative here who will speak to Cherry Creek, but they have since decided to leave EBSCO and go with this other system called Gale. Now, I understand that Gale has far less susceptibility, whether a student is using the system on the district network in classroom or at home. Now, today, kids will go home with a district iPad and do work at home. And I understand that Gale is a system. I believe that's an acronym, but it is less susceptible to this kind of image or advertising showing up on the student's iPad or other device. Great. Last summer, I was invited to a meeting of parents, and I admit to you, Mr. Chair, I went to the meeting.
Meeting where?
With constituents, parents. I was invited to a meeting of parents. And I went there ready to say what I've already said to you. I know there's a problem. And no, the legislature can't pass a law that forbids use of EBSCO or Gale or anything. We're not allowed to do that. The school board has the right to make this decision, and we can't pass a law that says you have to use this one, Gale or something else. We can't do that here. So I was ready to go talk with these parents about the realities of the Colorado Constitution and what we can and cannot do. What I heard there troubled me more than I understood before, of what kind of image and what kind of material students were able to access, or parents trying to understand what EBSCO and this system is, what parents were able to access through these portals, specifically EBSCO. And I agreed to work with the parents and effectively give them a bill title. But as we work through this, I have not found a better solution than one that I really didn't want to come here with, and that's a private right of action. The parents originally, in the drafter, the original draft that I had looked at, sought $10,000 for the first violation. And I said, no, I don't want to sue this company out of business. I want to try to find a way that EBSCO or others can be more like Gale or others where this seems to be less of a problem. I've also heard from school districts, and I believe that this to be far less a problem, and possibly we might hear it really isn't a problem when the student is in the classroom, either less of a problem or maybe not a problem, because district filtering system on their network prevents some of this from actually happening. What I would like to do, Mr. Chair, is allow those who support the bill to go first, because they've been waiting so long, to tell you some of their stories so that you understand what parents are dealing with. And I hope that I've conveyed enough to assure you that I'm frustrated. I wish there was something we could do other than this. But this is all I can find to try to give parents another tool. And I haven't heard from parents, really, who have said, let's outlaw EBSCO.
Right.
What I've heard from parents is, can we find a way that my child or their child can learn in our public school environment with hardware that the public school gives them, using software that the public school requires them or asks them to use, and do that without them seeing the most inappropriate material. Advertising, websites, that I guess we know it when we see it, but it's hard to describe what it is. When I first saw the draft, I asked the drafter, do we really need to describe it in such graphic terms? And he said, yes, to differentiate it from biology or human anatomy or even sex ed. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm grateful. One last perspective. I understand that there were materials distributed at a meeting or multiple meetings of the Cherry Creek School Board that some found to be inappropriate. And I've asked people in support or even those in opposition, please let's not do that here. And as a former committee chair, Mr. Chair, I respect that if there are materials just as I've distributed to you, the staff will come and get them, deliver them to you. You can say yes or no. In the four walls of this room, you're the boss. And I think that's a great example of what these parents are trying to find with these portals. Who can they go to say, wait a minute, there's something inappropriate here happening and my child was gained access. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And that's what they're really looking for. If we find a better way than Senate Bill 48, I'm all ears. If anybody has amendments or suggestions, I'm all ears. Mr. Chair, thank you so much for your patience as I explain how Senate Bill 48 made it here to your committee.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator Holbert, for bringing the bill. I'm sure that it will initiate an absolutely fascinating discussion in the 8 years that I've served with you, starting out with a coat bill. I've always enjoyed seeing the bills that you bring forth, and they are, for lack of a better term, interesting.
Yes, sir.
I do have a request from one witness from CASE, the school executives, who lives remotely, who would like to testify first in opposition. And in order for that person to be, to accommodate that request, I'm going to acquiesce in that request and bring up one witness in opposition first so that they can return to Eastern Colorado. So with your indulgence, I will do that. And
you are the chair, Mr. Chair.
And I appreciate your suggestion on procedure. I do like to have all witness data, information, et cetera, come through the chair. So any witnesses who want to bring information to the committee, please give it to Ms. Jensen, and she will distribute appropriately to the committee members. So, Ms. Rosen, you had a witness who wanted to testify. Please have him come forth. Mr. Masterson. Very good. Thank you for joining us, and I apologize for the delayed start of the hearing. We got hung up on, imagine this, school issues on the floor of the Senate and sort of got a late start on things. So appreciate you staying with us and joining us for this discussion. So
thank you for the opportunity.
Tell us who you represent and provide.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and no need to apologize. We're used to driving on the eastern plains of Colorado. So my name is Jared Masterson. I am the Director of Technology for the East Central BOCES. We're based out of Lyman. So I represent a number of school districts there in my day-to-day duties, but today I am testifying on behalf of CASE, the Colorado Association of School Executives, CASB, the Colorado Association of School Boards, and the Colorado Rural Alliance. So we are here testifying in opposition to this bill, and there are a variety of reasons, and I'll do some introduction around why that is, and then I would be more than happy to answer any questions that I might be able to provide some additional light on for the committee. The primary reason that we are in opposition to the bill is simply the breadth of the potential impact that this bill could have on the access to educational materials and resources for school districts. Specifically, the bill identifies entities that would be responsible for providing some filtering to their service, but doesn't really define what an entity might be in this instance. So there's potential for an entity to be able to be classified as just a general internet service provider. And are we expecting all internet service providers to provide filtering to school districts, even though that's not in their wheelhouse for what they're actually doing? They are providing a conduit to access materials, but they aren't actually providing the materials themselves. But this definition, as we read it, it could potentially be argued that they are, in fact, an entity providing access to those electronic materials. Additionally, the definition for what electronic education materials are is fairly broad and not well defined. And so the argument for what educational materials are could be EBSCO itself, as an example, or could be some materials that are being provided through EBSCO, as Encyclopedia Britannica or something along those lines. And so one of the additional concerns is that placing an onus upon entities such as an Encyclopedia Britannica or another service that provides strictly educational material already to then need to go forward and develop additional filtering services that aren't technically necessary for their platform could provide for a fairly heavy burden for some companies. And our concern is that we may see a significant contraction of the available resources that school districts would be able to access in the state.
So, Mr. Masterson, when I circled that same definition that you're describing, the electronically accessible education materials. And I wrote next to it Yahoo, AOL, and Netflix, which may show my age. But are those some of the providers of material who may fall into this morass of being subject to civil liability under this bill?
So there's definitely a possibility that an argument could be made for that. If you follow any European politics and the issues that the EU is having with Google and the access that Google is being provided, that Google is providing for European Union citizens, there is a big question about whether Google, a search engine, is actually providing that material, or whether Google is providing a conduit and a link to get to that material. And it's not a clear delineation, especially in the case of the likes of a Google or a Yahoo, where they are, those companies will take a position that state that, this is not our content. We are simply allowing people to locate this content on other entities' websites. However, when you do a Google search for a number of things, most people have probably run into where they will provide a very brief answer that you can click into for more detail.
Right.
And wind up on somebody else's website entirely, but that content is still being provided on the Google front page or on the Google search results page. And so there is definitely an argument that can be made, compellingly made in both ways, about whether or not Google or an AOL or a Yahoo are actually providing that content. So there's definitely a possibility there.
So is there an available, and again, I'm not technologically astute on this, is there a filter that a school district or a school or a library, for example, could purchase that would filter out objectionable material?
Yeah, and so actually that was one of the other things I definitely wanted to touch on while I was here.
Don't let me preempt you. Go right ahead.
No, absolutely. I appreciate the questions for sure. School districts, and I know of no school district that does not do this, already provides electronic filtering to all students that are on their campus. And in most cases, the school districts that I'm aware of that are sending devices home with students, they're also providing software on those devices in order to make sure that they're filtered even when they're off school grounds. And so in the instance of like a Google search, there is always a technological means that is placed either on the device or on the network that says once you click through Google and try to go to a website that's outside of that original, that original search results page, that basically does a filter, a go, no go, right? And that's actually a requirement that school districts face if they are going to accept federal E-rate money, which is a significant source of discounting revenue for purchasing things like internet service that can be very expensive depending upon where you are in the state. And so that is something that school districts are already doing. One of the issues that has specifically been raised around the EBSCO platform is that it is possible to wind up on a PDF, just like a scanned magazine article, and then through reading that article, finding a footnote that links you out to another web page on the internet, and then from there being able to link out to yet a third page on the internet, and click an advertisement from that page and going to a fourth site. And so at that point, you've removed yourself quite a bit from the original EBSCO search and the original document that was found from that library resource material. You've transitioned through several different steps and are on the internet at large. So if you're on school district property, school districts are already filtering for that. So once we see, from a networking perspective, from an IT professional perspective, once we see that result or that request leave EBSCO, we have the opportunity to look at that and say, is that appropriate or is that not? And I know, as I said, I know of no school district that does not do that today, and for a variety of reasons that we've already outlined.
Okay, very good. Anything else you want to tell us about?
Just one of the other things I did want to mention is that while we are required to do that by SIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act, Those laws have also been codified into state law through the Student Data Transparency and Privacy Act from a couple of years ago. So there are a variety of requirements that are being placed on school districts, and that school districts are, quite frankly, welcoming. It's nobody's desire to expose children to the kind of content that that is quite frankly for adults only.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a great point. And as I've talked with the parents and tried to prepare a bill that would be a solution, that's the perspective that I've tried to maintain. Some have said this is censorship. Well, no. All I'm looking for is that this district-based hardware and software would have the level of protection and filtering, if you want to call that censorship, okay, but filtering that should already exist, but you will hear from parents in some cases doesn't. I'm not an IT professional, but why? How do we prevent that from happening? And I would be grateful to understand if you're able, how is it that Gale has less of an issue with this and EBSCO has more?
Good question. Mr. Masterson.
And I don't know that I can address necessarily the intricacies of the Gale system versus the EBSCO system. I do know that in talking with one of my colleagues at Cherry Creek that although they have transitioned away from utilizing the EBSCO system, it is something that is available from a lot of public libraries in the state. And so, a couple of points to that is that as we discussed, if a student is utilizing district hardware or is on district equipment to access the internet, then we do have those filtering requirements into place. However, once they go home, or if they are sitting in a McDonald's and using the free Wi-Fi there, or are just frankly on their cell phone that many students in Colorado now have personally. We have no way to control that, right? That is the internet at large, and as we have all been stating, we're not looking to expose children to that kind of content, but it is not something that is technically feasible to say Verizon, you need to actually filter this device for this student because they are a student and not a parent. And Verizon necessarily wouldn't be able to tell that.
Okay, go ahead. Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm grateful for the answer, but again, for those who may want to advocate that this is somehow censorship, not any more than the standards that are already in place in schools to protect children. That's all we're after here. Not to take that a step further, but just allow the same level of protection that the child would have, the student would have sitting in the classroom on the district network. How do we disable that device or give them the same protection when they're not there?
And I would, something else that came to mind was that I do know of a number of school districts in the state that have offered to parents the ability, or not necessarily the ability, but the information on how they could set up some filtering, like on their home networks or on their child's personal device if they've issued those. And some districts and some parents have taken districts up on that offer.
Okay, very good. Anything else you want to share with us?
I think that's all that I have.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your...
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only knowledge, and to speak to Senator Holbert, and I think back to my youth and the mysteries of what you could see in National Geographic as a kid and the evolution of technology. A little bit I know, but I couldn't even imagine trying to protect that unless everything went into some kind of closed loop system and you guys didn't allow access to the internet completely. And then once they leave the building, how does anybody control that? So, yeah.
Well, and to your point earlier about individual school districts and school boards being able to maintain local control, this is that very thing is a topic that comes up quite a bit in discussions among IT professionals and CIOs that work in Colorado school districts. Is what level of filtering is the right level for an individual school or an entire district. And you do see districts fall in a number of different places along that spectrum. There are some that are much more laissez-faire and are filtering some of the most clearly explicit content and the clearly most inappropriate for students, and then allow much more freedom within the classroom for teachers to be able to innovate and to be able to actually do the good work that they do with their students. And then there are other districts that fall much more on the we're going to vet pretty much every resource in advance and make sure that we as a community and as a school board have had an opportunity to say that we like that. Now, that being said, the internet's a big place. It changes constantly, right? And so that some school districts have said that we are going to do that, but it is a huge undertaking requiring a lot of man hours and resources to be able to say that every single application, every single website that a teacher might want to access would have to go through some sort of an approval process. So does that answer the question there? Yes, absolutely, it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Senator Holbert, I'll put it back to you. You want to go remote, or do you have witnesses here? How do you want to proceed?
Linda Pierce Groner, I think, is sitting in Lamar and probably has been for about 3 hours, waiting her turn.
Let's bring him into Colfax.
Please.
Hello, my name is Brenda Fickenshire. I'm a rancher. I've been an educator for 36 years, and I've taught in rural schools out here in southeast Colorado.
Could you say your name again? I'm sorry.
Brenda Fickenshire, Fickenscher.
Okay, very good. Please proceed with your testimony, and thank you for patiently awaiting us. We appreciate your participation.
Thank you, sir. As an adult, I've been involved in education for 36 years in the following areas: community education, coaching, substitute teaching, bus driver, and class sponsor. For the last 15 years, I've taught full-time in the junior high and high school sciences, VOAG, and life skills instructor. My information is from the educational realm. I hope to enlighten you a little bit on what I have witnessed in this age of new technology. Number one, the ease of access. Yes, there are firewalls and filters, and IT people are constantly trying to work with this, and I think it was very enlightening with Mr. Masterson of what they are able to do. Hopefully they could do it more throughout the state. The IT personnel in our area deal with invasive programs. They stated they are bombarded with programs that circumnavigate their systems. It takes consistent diligence to stay on top of this cyber storm. And they also have other responsibilities of keeping computers up and going in a lot of different facilities around this 7-county area. And this is an issue, and I think it's around the world right now. But right here for Colorado, our children are very intelligent. There's times I go and ask them, can you fix this for me? Because they're very sharp and can do it. But they're able to break through some of these firewalls and filters very easily. We also have, when I've been in the computer lab, when I've sent kids to do some research for science, I walk around the room and watch what is being brought up. There are pop-ups that come up that are suggestive. There are sidebars that are advertising things. And also there are times that teachers allow them to go on to popular internet sites once their work is done. And they're, amazingly enough, I have witnessed some pretty graphic material. One of the ones that just blew me away was on Pinterest. And I am like, where did you find this on Pinterest? But you can find a lot. If you go far enough with Pinterest, I guess, you can find inappropriate material. At the beginning of the school year, staff, teachers, and students are required to sign a form on internet use. And if they violate what has been laid out, then even with the teachers, you are not on the internet or with your computer for an extended period of time. It could even be for the year. Okay, so we are trying to do some safeguards there. Okay, the second point I want to make is the habitual exposure causes rewiring in the brain. The neuron and dendrite connections are being altered, causing compromised development of brain areas. As the prefrontal cortex is one of the last parts of the brain to develop, maturity of this part is around the age of 25. The prefrontal cortex involves complex behaviors, which include judgmental calls, personality development, memory, problem solving, emotional expression, language, and sexual behaviors. Therefore, if some of this rewiring is occurring, there can be injury to that part of the brain. The third part I'd like to bring up is availability to all forms of media devices. And again, it also comes to the parents and guardians of these minors. We cannot regulate. We try to regulate in schools of either the cell phones have to be in the lockers. Even in classrooms, we have to get permission for them to be in use. And other media devices, iPads, Chromebooks, just the regular desktop computers they have access to, and even the young children are able to circumnavigate and get through these pretty fast. They've learned before they ever got to school how to operate a lot of these devices very quickly. And they can get places that just aren't appropriate for them. They also may have older siblings that they have watched or been taught how to get around this. In our junior high and high school students, they are also very astute and knowledgeable about apps, programs, and sites. And fortunately, there's times when if they leave the computer lab and there is a thought that something wasn't right, we can go back in their history if they haven't cleared that history and find out what's going on. We also, have to worry about cyberbullying. Okay, so I have ongoing communication with young people on the newest apps, devices, programs, etc. They're available to keep myself up to date and know what could be used during class time. I have actually had students that have the ability to have a phone in their pocket and be texting other people. We've had students that were secretly taping things going on in classrooms or videotaping things, and they can get it onto the Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram immediately. So it is a huge issue in education and what we can do and what we're not able to do.
So, Ms. Fickens,
children should have the... Yes.
I wanted to ask you a question. I appreciate what you've told us and the concerns that you have addressed, and that's very helpful to the committee. What are your thoughts on the bill, Senate Bill 48, as a remedy or a solution to these issues?
I think it is a bill. I mean, we've worked on it for quite a while, just trying to stop the dissemination of this information into our schools, into education. And I am for this bill. There has to be some stopgate here to get people's attention and also to make them aware that this isn't what the kids need to be exposed to.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us?
Not right now. I'll let my other members here visit with you.
Okay, well, let's see if there's any questions from the members of the committee. Senator Gardner has a question for you, Ms. Fickenshire.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for waiting so long to testify. I think you already addressed this, but I just want to ask so the committee can focus on your experience with this. As you're teaching, how frequently do you observe children trying to view pornography, inappropriate material like that, out of curiosity? Does it happen daily?
Ms. Fickenshire.
I have not witnessed it daily. My deal is in the science room that I was last teaching at, we did not have computers in the classroom. They were only for my use, and so we would go to the computer lab, and there, yes, it might be other classes that were in there that I view, but I guess my deal is made sure that I monitored when they went into another room with computers. I was there to monitor it. I felt that was my duty to be there for their questions and help them, but also to observe and make sure that they weren't going places they shouldn't.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you. Again, I'm trying to get a handle on how disruptive this was to the learning process. You say as they went to computer rooms, you observed this a lot. I mean, was it a big interference in the classroom or in the learning environment?
Ms. Fickenshire.
And yes, with kids that were there on their own, were not with my class, it was disruptive at times. I'm not saying daily, but it was disruptive. And a lot of times I just had to tell them they had to shut the computers down, even though they were not my students at that hour. So, yes, it could be disruptive to my classes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to hand the baton to your companion there? Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us, and thanks for your patience. If you could identify yourself and tell us if you represent any organization, and then proceed with your testimony.
My name is Barbara Hernandez. I'm from here in Lamar, and I represent myself.
Please proceed.
Do you want me to go ahead? Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak today supporting Senate Bill 48. As a mother and grandmother, I've been extremely active in my children and grandchildren's education. I've worked as a volunteer with children at many levels. Our family has had a traumatic experience with the very subject that I'm testifying about, the tragedy a family suffers when a young child innocently goes on to a child-friendly website and decides to visit with a friend about their horses, never knowing he will be led to a direct chat line where a pedophile seduces him. Having heard and seen evidence of explicit sexual material on the EBSCO database embedded in the Homework Help tab for school and public libraries, I decided to research it for myself. And I've used an adult and a student library card to do this. I found that innocent search tabs, terms such as robots and unicorns, in the elementary and middle school homework help tabs led to sexually explicit material, as well as the opportunity to click on other subject matters within the article, such as human sexuality. The middle and high school homework help tabs, such as newspaper source plus, allows the student to choose databases. Popular among these choices are Masterfile Premier, Mass Ultra School Edition, Middle Search Plus, and Academic Search Premier that provide access to an abundance of sexually explicit material with using search terms that teens would use, such as sex, transgender, lust, girls' stories, and boys' stories. On the Mass Ultra School Edition, using the search term sex, you will find 65,000 magazine articles on sex. These articles have subject titles within the articles that are too sensitive for me to even mention. One click on any of them could easily lead to nude photographs, adult sex toy businesses, erotica films, and chat rooms. When I chose Middle Search Plus for middle schoolers and used the search term lust, I was led to a Lust Online magazine article with 6 1-800 numbers for the students to call. I try to monitor the homework help tabs regularly in our public library, which also streams EBSCO to our schools, according to the Lamar Public Librarian. The format may be rearranged, but the pornography is always present. EBSCO claims that they're proprietary and cannot be filtered. We have made computer presentations to our school superintendent where we accessed the sexually explicit material from his school computer to the city librarian, to the city administrator, to the library advisory board, and to our mayor, using the Lamar Public Library website showing exactly what we have found on the homework help tabs. At every presentation, we were able to successfully access the sexually explicit material, which is obscene with respect to minors and or is harmful to minors as these terms are legally defined. Yet not one city or school official stands accountable. In conclusion, these databases claim to have age-appropriate content, easy for young readers to search and explore, and are supposedly tailored for elementary, middle, and high school libraries supporting the Common Core standards, when in reality, unsuspecting children believing themselves to be using a safe school research database can easily stumble upon sexually explicit and shocking material that can devastate them for the rest of their lives and possibly lead to an addiction or expose them to a dangerous sex predator. And I know firsthand the trauma that child will suffer. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. I appreciate your testimony. You mentioned homework tabs. How often did you log on to those homework tabs, and did you find any monitoring filters when you did?
Ms. Hernandez.
I always you have to log on to the homework help tabs because those are the recommended resources for students doing any kind of work, schoolwork. And no, I did not notice any kind of filtering.
Senator Cook.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So no filtering on the homework tabs. I find that kind of shocking. I think you told us what you discovered on those tabs, sex and 1-800 numbers and that kind of stuff. Is that correct? And did you discover anything else on those?
Ms. Hernandez.
No, I figured that was enough.
Okay.
Cover. I did find very the articles that were recommended for them even scholastically were way above the heads of a child, and to me did not provide information that was even understandable for children to write a report on or do research on.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Hernandez? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, and thanks for helping inform our discussions here at the Capitol.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please identify yourself, tell us if you represent someone or any organization, and then provide us with your statement?
Yes, my name is Claudia Gill. I'm a mother of 5, a grandmother of 5, and I'm a concerned citizen. I represent myself and my concern for what's going on in this library and in the schools here in Lamar. I'm very interested in the law and what has already been passed. I'd like to, in my study, I went ahead and read that in the Supreme Court case, United States et al. Appellants versus American Library Association, Incorporated, it was June 23rd, 2003. The quote was that public libraries do not install Internet terminals to provide a forum for web publishers to express themselves, but rather to provide patrons with online material of requisite and appropriate quality. In 2000, Congress enacted the Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA, which is overseen by the Federal Communications Commission, that requires public libraries that participate in Library Services and Technology Act, LISTA, grants, and E-rate discount programs to certify that they are using computer filtering software to prevent the on-screen depiction of obscenity, child pornography, or other material harmful to minors. The acts allow adult library patrons to request that a librarian disable the filtering software. However, in order for libraries to receive E-rate discounts, libraries are not allowed to disable filtering programs for minor uses. And in the publication W.K. Cates, Collection Development, the Selection of Materials for Libraries in 1980, the quote is said, "The librarian's responsibility is to separate out the gold from the garbage, not to preserve everything. A library's need to exercise judgment in making collection decisions depends on its traditional role in identifying suitable and worthwhile material. It is no less entitled to play that role when it collects material from the internet than when it collects material from other sources. Most libraries already exclude pornography from their print selections because they deem it inappropriate for inclusion. When the government appropriates public funds to establish a program, it is entitled to define the limits of that program." That was from Rust versus Sullivan, 500 U.S. 173, 194, 1991. The E-rate and Library Services and Technology Act, LISTA programs, were intended to help public libraries fulfill their traditional role of obtaining material of requisite and appropriate quality for education and informational purposes. Congress may certainly insist that these public funds be spent for the purposes for which they were authorized, especially because public libraries have traditionally excluded pornographic material from their other collections. Congress could reasonably impose a parallel limitation on its Internet assistance programs. To the extent that libraries who wish to offer unfiltered access, they are free to do so without federal assistance. And then under the Colorado Statute 2490-601, the General Assembly hereby finds and declares that use of the Internet in the public libraries of the state provides an extraordinary, unique, and unparalleled educational resource and source of knowledge and information. The General Assembly further finds and declares that reasonable measures must be adopted and implemented to protect the children who use such Internet services in public libraries from access to material that is harmful, which means any picture, image, graphic image, file, or other visual depiction, to their beneficial development as responsible adults and citizens. It is the intent of the General Assembly, by enacting this Part 6 of the Internet Protection in Public Libraries, that public libraries be required to adopt and enforce reasonable policies of Internet safety that are consistent with the Federal Children's Internet Protection Act. In conclusion, I suggest that within this Senate Bill 48, it include a method of enforcement and implementation of consequences for violating the policy of Internet safety for minors, similar to the Federal Children's Internet Protection Act's remedy for violations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gill, for your testimony. We very much appreciate it. Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, again, we thank you very much for your testimony, and thanks for participating in our discussions from Lamar. The benefits of technology and the challenges of technology are both illustrated by your presence. Ms. Dawson, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Belinda Groner, and I'm a researcher, and I've been researching this information about how the information actually gets into the system. And I want to explain to you that when we started this, we had no idea it was going to take us a year or two to research all this information. It is so complex, and I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this testimony and understand just how important it is to our children. I'm a big believer in education. I love for our children to have the electronic resources. I love for them to have everything there is available to them. But what I don't condone is the sexually explicit material that's been streaming to them through the Homework Help tab. Specifically, the fact that the Homework Help tab is where these children go, and the parents don't know to go there. Most parents don't know to go check the Homework Help tab. They're busy working, making money, supporting their family, and they're trusting the schools and the libraries to do due diligence to make sure their children are safe. They would have no reason to go to this Homework Help tab. When this was discovered, it was discovered accidentally, and then as we researched more and more, what we found is the Colorado Department of Education actually creates a template which is used by both the libraries and the schools. That template is then programmed by each individual librarian. So in our case, in Lamar, we found that the school library, their tab, and Homework Help tab, is programmed differently than the ones at our local library. So when we discovered that, my question was, well, how does this material actually get there? And what we found was our library and our school district purchases this material from a provider such as EBSCO, or it could be Overdrive or other data suppliers. When they purchased this material, it was found when I personally contacted EBSCO, and they stated their material could not be filtered, that it was proprietary, and once you entered that, you were not allowed to filter it. So no matter how hard our schools worked or how hard our librarians worked, that material couldn't be filtered. Yet this material that we're purchasing is being paid for with taxpayer dollars. So we're out here purchasing and making a subscription to this provider, whether it be EBSCO or Gale or ProQuest, and yet we're allowing them to stream information that is not good for our children. So when we contacted them originally, they actually didn't give us a time of day. And the more we started calling them and questioning and asking questions and how it was streamed and what to do and how can we protect our children and still get the benefit of all the wonderful material that's out there on the internet. So that's the challenge that you as a Judiciary Committee face today. And I really want to share a couple of facts that is really important. There are some studies that tell what happens to our children when we choose to ignore this. We have to do something to protect our children to prevent damage to them. Here's some facts from some studies. Pornography is linked to sexual violence among adults and adolescents. A nationally represented survey of pornography use among ages 9 through 17 found that those with increased exposure to internet pornography were significantly more likely to report physical and sexual victimization. And that comes from a national survey from Cyber Psychology and Behavior from 2005. A separate study of 14 to 19-year-olds found that females who watch pornographic videos were at a significantly greater likelihood of being victims of sexual harassment or sexual assault. This was from the use of pornography and self-reported engagements in sexual violence amongst adolescents in the European Journal of Development Psychology from 2006. A study of 804 Italian males and females, aged 14 to 19, found that males who viewed pornography were significantly more likely to report having sexually harassed a peer or forcing someone to have sex. These are all factual information that we know. It's not we're guessing that's what will happen to our children. This is proof of what has happened. So in our efforts and what we're doing, I think it is critical to realize that when these children go online and they see these things, they tend to believe that the computer knows everything. The computer's wise, it's all-knowing, and they believe it to be the truth, whether it's the truth or not. So it's a very dangerous spot for them to get engaged with this porn and the sexual activities that it's talking about. And they go to these items by using normal terms. And I'm going to give you one example. We put in the term unicorn. Little kids will look up a unicorn. When we put in the unicorn, it showed a unicorn. It told a story about a unicorn. But the second one said horny unicorn, and it showed a vibrator to use with children. And that was in the elementary homework help tab. This is totally unacceptable. And if we can't do anything about it, I think that we have failed. We can manage to do a lot of things, so we should be able to do something to stop this. And the reason I think that Senator Holbert came up with this injunctive relief is because it is a very difficult situation. The people that are streaming this, I'll give you an example because we did a Cora. EBSCO received from our little library $1,850 for their package. So if all the libraries around and all the schools are paying, they're getting a huge amount of money for their service. They should be able to financially be able to provide the proper filtering if they're just willing to do it. And some of the discussions we've had with our local representatives, well, EBSCO has so much good that the little bit of bad is outweighed by all the good. I don't think that we should settle for that for our children. I think we should demand all of the good, and we should hold EBSCO or whoever the supplier is accountable to remove the sexually explicit material and provide what we have requested by this subscription, which is educational material proven to be safe for minors. And very simply, they are not doing that. Every year, the Colorado Department of Education gives the CLIC for the Colorado Library Consortium $1 million of help and assistance. Surely, with part of those funds, we can figure out a way to properly protect our children. But better than that, this bill indicates the supplier will be held accountable. And so if they continue to stream it, even though we've asked them not to stream it and only requested the subscribed material, then they would be penalized. I know this is a very difficult subject. I appreciate your attention to all the testimony and the ability to be here remotely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Groner, for participating in our discussions. It's very helpful to us to have people from the community provide their insights and experience. So thank you very much. Let me ask you this. The concern you express is with regard to this material coming through the schools and the library. Aren't the school boards or the people that run the libraries responsive to the requests? I mean, those are parents of children, and they would certainly share your concerns about the type of material that is coming through. So have you raised your concerns with the people at the libraries and the school boards?
Absolutely, Senator Lee. We have raised them for the past year. And what we have found, as part of the discussions they had, is they acknowledged there was bad things, but then they said that the good outweighed the bad. We have actually gone to all of these meetings. We have a small group called the Heritage Defenders that's been working on this project. And we actually served them with the first letter of concern back in September of 17. And then they told us that EBSCO could be filtered, but yet EBSCO sent us a letter saying it couldn't be filtered. So there was a difference of opinion in what we were told and what EBSCO could do. As it progressed, as you can see in the Cherry Creek, when they had their schools, their IT people researched it and said the filtering that they could get was not satisfactory. It would not reach the standards of acceptance by them. I also contacted some other school districts who had removed some exclusion lists. And our library, we presented them with an exclusion list. They removed part of it, but not all of it. In that exclusion list, we had some school districts that actually went through and had the IT resources. It was Adams, K-12 actually, went through and researched and did find that a lot of the material was coming from magazine articles that shouldn't have been located in the homework help tab to begin with. I think the problem is no matter how hard the librarian tries, they may think their filtering is being successful, but it is not being successful. So, and we have proven that by pulling up things time after again. We have pulled up material even after they said it has been filtered and it's improved, and we could go right to it and pull it up. So I think that because EBSCO states their information is proprietary and it cannot be filtered, I think they can filter certain keywords. For example, what we found is used to when you put in sex that all these things would pop up. Well, now it might not be as many. Maybe there's a different term. However, just as I said before, when we pulled up something as simple as unicorn, here comes this. None of that should be in there. And the research that I've shown, this porn industry is $1 billion industry. There's a lot of money tied to it. There's a lot of people in this big world of internet resources. For example, when you buy the package through the Colorado Library Consortium, I think there's 25 suppliers of electronic data that comes through there. And it's great that you have the discount in the package, but if the material is harming our children, we have to filter it or get it removed so that it doesn't happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Senator Cook has a question for you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you might have said this, and I might have missed it, and I apologize if I did, but how are the homework help tabs programmed?
Ms. Groner.
Okay. I'm sorry. So when I contacted the Colorado Department of Education, they have an IT department, and they actually program what's called the menu for the schools and the libraries. So there's an actual menu, and then they leave it blank. And then each individual school and the school librarian or the librarian at the public library will then program what goes to those tabs. So then they can be different, and they will be different. It's done with each individual librarian. So on the state level, they provide the IT to write the framework and to design the tabs to make it easy for the librarians to then program them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Ms. Groner? Seeing none, again, thank you very much for your, well, I think Senator Cook has another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. Can you explain the difference between the subscribe curated database and the internet?
Yes, sir. And there is a lot of confusion in that. You know, the curated database is a database that is purchased with taxpayer dollars, and it is bought and paid for and requested to be brought into the schools and the libraries. The internet is just basic internet access. So what we have located this porn streaming is actually through the curated database that is subscribed and paid for. That's what makes it so alarming. It's not coming over just the general internet. It's coming through a homework help tab targeting our children.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your help.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's anyone else there.
Is there anyone else in Lamar who would like to testify? I had a Donna Dawson on the list. Is Donna Dawson there?
She was sick and she couldn't make it.
Okay, thank you. So no further testimony from Lamar. Okay.
That's right, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Senator Holbert, back to you.
If there are those here in the room who support, could we go there next?
Sure. Jeff Hunt. Good afternoon, Mr. Hunt. Thanks for sticking with us this afternoon. We appreciate your patience.
Yeah, happy to. Members of the committee, thanks so much for having me testify. My name is Jeff Hunt. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy at Colorado Christian University, and I direct their think tank, the Centennial Institute. We're here today in support of Senate Bill 19048 concerning protecting public students from electronically accessing harmful material. This bill establishes an important partnership between parents and educators to protect children from harmful content. Parents deserve to know that when they entrust their children to educators, they will not be exposed to harmful or obscene material. It's critical for us to remember that education is a partnership between parents and teachers, and that ultimately the right to educate a child rests with parents. This bill puts into place important common sense guardrails to ensure Colorado's children are not exposed to harmful or obscene content against a parent's will. The Centennial Institute urges you to support Senate Bill 19048. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have a number of witnesses who are have not indicated they are for or against. So can I just call them
Or just maybe ask, is there anyone else in support?
Well, that would be another way to do it. Come on up. You got two of you. Why don't you come up together? Good afternoon. If you could identify yourselves and tell us if you represent any institution and then provide us with your testimony, we'd be most grateful.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Robin Patterson. I'm a retired medical research scientist and a former assistant professor of immunology at CU Health Sciences. I represent a Colorado organization called Pornography is Not Education, and we advocate the use of safe technology in schools. So there's been some discussion that the internet is inherently dangerous, and most K-12 schools do employ some filtering software for student safety. The discussion surrounding the databases is really something that's relatively new on the scene with these databases, and they're very heavily marketed by several large corporations, EBSCO being one. There's some others, and they're promoted specifically as safe internet alternatives. And this marketing is very heavy. I think that's an important point. And we shouldn't conflate these databases with the internet because, as some of the other people have pointed out, the vendors and manufacturers say that they can't filter them. They're actually proprietary and curated collections of digital media, if you will, articles and various other media. And I think that creates a challenge for the schools and for the libraries where they're advertising these for minors. I know that in the Cherry Creek School District, where we're parents, they became very frustrated with trying to get EBSCO to do some filtering at their end. And that has to be done internally, as I understand it, with the vendors. So I want to take a minute to talk about pornography and how it's very harmful to minors. This is a very, very important issue facing our schools in the state and also nationwide. There's significant evidence pointing to the addictive nature of porn and its harm to a developing brain. It's laden with misogynistic themes and violence. It's been estimated that over 80% of internet porn depicts women subjected to verbal or physical aggression, The normalization of sexual violence distorts perceptions of healthy relationships and has been linked to the epidemic of sexual violence by minors. Here in Colorado, recent news reports have shed light on the problem of student-on-student sexual violence, and it's really a growing concern around the country. I have a copy, actually, of the 04 testimony of Dr. Judith Reisman, director of the Child Protection Institute at Liberty University, before the United States Subcommittee on Science, Technology, and Space. She sent this to me last night, and I would like to provide some copies to you, if I may.
Sure, if you can give them to Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. And
to the committee members.
I also include an excerpt from Fight the New Drug, which some Colorado schools, as I understand it, are inviting this group to talk to students about porn. So to share my experience as a parent, I located porn quite by accident in our middle school homework databases. Explicit, gratuitous images, erotic text, links to hardcore porn, ads for sex toys and BDSM paraphernalia, and even sign-up portals for escort work, all extensively networked through live search terms that just categorically have no business in a K-12 school database. I hesitate to say all the terms: lust, bestiality, sadomasochism, group sex, dildos, and I could just go on and on. Why are terms like this an integral part of EBSCO databases?
And when you discuss this with the Cherry Creek School Board, what did they tell you? It just seems difficult for me to understand why they couldn't get EBSCO to screen out some of this objectionable material.
I think you're asking me to speculate as to motives. This goes back a couple of years.
Did they answer your questions? I mean, you advocated to them. How did they respond?
In the beginning, they said it wasn't there. And then as we continued to, go to the school board meetings and address them and show it to them and say, come on, look at this, then they said, all right, well, we called EBSCO and we told them we don't like it, and they took some out. EBSCO had to do some filtering internally at their end, which could, as I understand it from the IT department, not be done by the school. And so they, little by little, they said, okay, we did some. We went back and we said, well, you really need to do some more. And eventually, as you saw in the news, the Cherry Creek School District just got tired, and it would seem to me they threw up their hands and said they're just not working with us.
Okay, go ahead. If you have further testimony.
I just would also like to point out that these databases are paid for by taxpayer dollars. And I can tell you that what they look like when you find them, they actually have the school name up on top of some of these articles that come up. And these articles are obscene for minors. And then it has the school name right on the top of it, which is like an endorsement by the school. So it's like you're telling the kids, hey, this is okay for, we told you to go here to do your homework, and look, you're here, and here's the school name, and this is okay, we like this. So these school database products are sold all over Colorado and the country, and again, they're unique. They're not the internet, and they shouldn't be conflated with the internet. They're proprietary, curated digital collections, which often cannot be filtered by top site filters, and creating these challenges for schools to work directly with the manufacturers to demand cleanup. And I think the issue of porn infiltrating our schools might be one of the biggest challenges that we face in the 21st century. As awareness grows, in fact, it's been estimated that hundreds of schools nationwide are demanding accountability from vendors who are lax about product safety. And I do think that research and homework databases may be useful tools, notwithstanding bias that you have to pay to be in them, but that aside, they may be useful research tools, but we need to respect the state and federal statutes that have been put in place to protect minors. So I think the bill raises awareness and really holds us all accountable for speaking up about child safety.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Dr. Patterson?
Thank you.
Sir, do you have some testimony to provide us with?
I do. My name is Drew Patterson. I'm here as a representative of Pornography is Not Education. Before I start my remarks, I'd like to give a little bit of elaboration on the nature of EBSCO and other databases that are provided to children. If you consider a black box with two pipes leading out of it from either end, into the black box goes a steady stream of content from various publishers. Those publishers pay EBSCO to take this material into their databases. EBSCO does no filtering by contract. Whoever signs up sends material in there. At the other end of the pipeline, or the box, is a pipeline going out to schools and libraries. That's the internet. So a school or library will use their internet pipe to get to the EBSCO site where they log in, and that allows them access to the database. Once inside the database, the school filters don't work, your home filters don't work. It is unfiltered by design. So the concept of applying school filters, so-called top site filters at a library or a school, is just misleading and not effective. It doesn't happen. When you're in that database, what's in there, you see if you access it. So that's a little bit about how EBSCO and other database providers work. I'd like to expand a bit on my testimony on our personal experience and some alarming statistics.
Sure, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here are some disturbing statistics concerning children and pornography. New data suggests that children under the age of 10 now account for 10% of all visitors to porn video sites. The average age of first perpetuation of sexual violence is ages 15 to 16 and is associated with exposure to pornography. The average age of first exposure to pornography is 11 years of age. 93% of boys and 62% of girls have seen online pornography before the age of 18. The Association for Television on Demand, a research firm in the UK, found that at least 44,000 primary school children and 473,000 children between the ages of 6 and 17 had accessed an adult website using their computers. They did not have statistics for access by mobile devices, but given how ubiquitous mobile devices are, you can imagine how those numbers would increase. 13% of boys and 10% of girls say that the porn content they watch has become more extreme over time. So like a drug addict, they require ever bigger kicks of the drug. Now, these are horrible and disturbing statistics, and one wonders where and how the first exposure to pornographic content occurred. Was it at a library or a school? Our organization has been engaged in a protracted hostile battle with suppliers of pornographic content to schools and libraries, such as EBSCO Information Services. Through the Colorado Library Association, these database products are sold to public libraries and schools which use our tax dollars to purchase products tainted with pornographic content. Through this 2.5-year battle with our school district and our public library, we faced scorn, hostility, threats against us, public ridicule, and condemnation as censors. It was only after our school district learned that our organization was preparing a lawsuit against them that they did the right thing and suspended their subscription with EBSCO. At one school meeting that we attended, an adult woman relayed that her nephew had been exposed to pornography at a very young age and had been taking therapy ever since. Who pays for the damages caused to the children that have been exposed to this material? What recourse do parents currently have? None. They are helpless to achieve the primary duty of a parent, and that is to protect their children from harm. Parents should not have to go through this type of battle, should not have to endure threats and personal attacks just to protect their children from pornography and protect them from becoming one of the dismal statistics previously relayed. Let's be clear. Federal and Colorado law prohibits the display of obscene material to children. The disappointing reality is, however, that prosecutors are reluctant to prosecute these cases. They are dirty, nasty, and everyone comes away feeling unclean. In the absence of any prosecutorial enthusiasm for taking on these cases, it is vital that parents have the tools necessary to protect their children. Please help us do this. Now, I understand that all of you have been receiving a high volume of calls from librarians and other American Library Association surrogates urging you to reject this bill. I completely understand their motivation for this. They do not want to be held accountable for their actions in hurting children. Let me just say this, we are all held accountable for our actions. Vendors of these products, libraries and schools should be no exception. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this important bill. Please support Senate Bill 1948 for the health and safety of our children. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Patterson. Are there any questions for Mr. Patterson from the committee? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really want to thank you for coming and sharing your lived experience. And upon reading this article, I wanted to just ask, in this fight, to use your words that you had with EBSCO, was it your impression that they were that this database was protecting its ability to continue to provide that objectionable content?
You have an answer for that?
Dr. Patterson?
EBSCO does promise its publishing clients and advertising clients that they will have the ability to expand their marketplace. And that's on their website, so it does raise the question.
They also promise their publishing clients that their material will not be filtered. They talk about expanding target markets. They talk about increasing sales. If you look at their marketing material on their website, it's quite apparent that like most businesses, and I don't begrudge them profit, but they're there to make a profit.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I also have testimony from Jenna Ellis of the Colorado Family Action.
So you've distributed that to us?
No, I didn't.
Okay, go ahead.
Would you like me to read it, sir?
Sure.
Okay. This is the written testimony of Jenna Ellis, constitutional law attorney and Colorado bar licensed on behalf of Colorado Family Action and carried by Robin Patterson. Colorado Family Action supports the intent of this bill to protect minor children at public schools from the ability to access obscene or otherwise harmful materials. It should be manifestly obvious to everyone here that government-provided electronics should never be used as a conduit or medium facilitating minor children accessing obscene or harmful material such as pornography. According to EndSexualExploitation.org, 25 states have internet filtering laws that apply to publicly funded schools or libraries. The majority of these states simply require school boards to adopt internet use policies to prevent minors from accessing sexually explicit, obscene, or harmful materials. However, some states do require publicly funded institutions to install filtering software on school computers and even libraries. The Supreme Court has upheld the federal law titled Children's Internet Protection Act, or CIPA, which similarly requires that recipients of specific types of federal funding certify that they are using computer filtering software. The Supreme Court held in United States versus American Library Association 2003 that this requirement for filtering does not violate the First Amendment, even if the filter in use blocks some legitimate sites, because libraries may disable filters for adult patrons upon request. Here, this bill is focusing specifically on public schools with enrolled minor children, not libraries where adult patrons would be commonly expected. This bill requires that each school district or public school ensure that appropriate filters are in place on electronics accessible to students. Colorado Family Action supports this and encourages this committee to consider the protection of our children from the ability to access obscene or harmful material on a government-provided electronic device as a common sense measure. We will note that we have some concern about the lack of clarification in the bill's text regarding an entity that provides electronically accessible education materials to a public school, and whether the sponsors intend for this bill to also contemplate a requirement for private sector service and software providers. We comment herein for the record our support of the bill's intent insofar as the legislature requiring publicly funded schools to certify compliance with installing filters on all school-owned or operated electronics accessible or reasonably able to be accessed. This is a good step in protecting Colorado's minor children from harmful and obscene material.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can I offer one insight into the whole filtering? So we have SIPA laws, we have Colorado state statutes that require filtering by libraries and by schools to protect children from obscene content. The schools and libraries can, I think, legitimately claim that they are in compliance with SIPA and that they are in compliance with Colorado state statutes, because indeed they do provide filtering software. The problem and the loophole is that that software does not work within the EBSCO and other databases. So that's why this law is needed. It's to cover up that hole in the legislation that allows them to, on the one hand, claim that they're in compliance with Colorado statutes and SIPA, and at the same time access this material through databases.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else in support of the bill? Anyone else in support of the bill? I have some additional witnesses who have signed up, all of whom appear to be against. You want to hear that? Okay. James LaRue. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. And thank you for staying with us through the long afternoon.
Well, thank you, sir. And greetings, Senator. How are you? Okay, Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you so much for the opportunity to address what I think are some very disturbing implications of Senate Bill 48. My name is Jamie LaRue, and from 1990 to 2014, so for 24 years, I was the director of the Douglas County Libraries. And during that time, our work with digital content was featured in Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, Governing magazine. We were among the first to adopt many digital platforms, including EBSCO in 1996. And I should say from 1996 to when I left in 2014, I received not a single complaint of pornographic content in EBSCO. From 2016 to 18, I was director of the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom, and our job there was to track and to combat censorship attempts in America's libraries. And I've also written quite a bit about internet, digital publishing, and filtering for over 30 years. It's an obsession. So most of the attempts to remove or restrict access to library resources that we tracked at ALA really focused on books. So June of 2017 was the first time that we received a formal complaint about these digital collections. And what I want to understand, because I think there's some persistent confusion about this, we're basically talking about EBSCO. Its job is it's an aggregator of mostly periodical information. So it doesn't create this stuff. And what it does is it says, back in the old days, we had copies of the magazines and you'd go to look for it and it would be gone or some article would be ripped out. We said, okay, great. If we can digitize this stuff, somebody can walk up, you can do the search and you get the citation for research. And then EBSCO offers two versions of things. There's an HTML version, and you can understand why they don't want it filtered at that level, because they don't want someone to come in and remove parts of somebody's article that they are paying copyright on. Or there's a PDF version of it. And that's the sort of thing that, here's a picture of the article, and then there might be one of those ads that you heard referred to. would be pointed to because it was in the print edition as well, but it's not a live link. And so, yes, it's a walled garden, and what you're looking at is the text that would be in print, but it doesn't take you out to the ad. And I absolutely say that the ability to sign up on a portal for an escort service is not possible within EBSCO. It could only happen if you went outside the EBSCO walled garden, and that's where the filter within a school would have prevented it. I hope that's helpful. So when we first heard our first complaint about this in June of 2017, the complaint was that pornography in EBSCO, there was pornography and obscenity in EBSCO, and this is one of the nation's oldest and most respected aggregators of mainstream periodicals. And by mainstream, I mean they offer you which titles do you want. And the titles would include things like almost anything you would find in a newsstand: Time Magazine, Better Homes and Gardens, National Geographic, and the text of newspapers. Okay, so we're not talking about websites. We're not talking about everything that's out there on the web. We're talking about digital editions of print. So let me say at the outset that I've taken a very close look at these charges. I've worked with EBSCO for a long time, and I've gone back to try to reproduce the supposed difficulties with it. They're not there. And so let me say flat out, the charges are as absurd as they are outrageous. There is not a single verified example of obscene content in EBSCO, and I think that the people behind these challenges trot out very extreme claims, often based on convoluted and irreproducible search results. There was an attempt in Utah to kind of change the whole educational consortium to get them to withdraw EBSCO. They at first froze this, and then this educational group in Utah went back and tried to reproduce this and found that the claims that were being made simply weren't true, and they reinstated EBSCO. So that's worth knowing. The people who support this bill have consistently conflated age inappropriate with pornography, with obscenity. I think that confusion is deliberate. As I'm sure many of you members of the committee are aware, obscenity has a legal definition, which you see in the proposed bill here. Pornography and age inappropriate do not. And these are often conflated, and I think that's a real First Amendment issue. I hope committee members are aware that in Colorado, school libraries are in real trouble. We've seen an extraordinary decline of school librarians. Library collections are being decimated. It's about a 20% drop in overall school librarians over the past 15 years. And this is despite the fact that 26 states have now done studies showing that the greatest single predictor of academic achievement is a strong library program. And so what we're finding is that with fewer school librarians and smaller school collections, EBSCO and things like these aggregated databases are just about the only resources that are available to students in our high schools today. So in the fall of 2017, I knew about some of these challenges, and I contacted EBSCO and I said, walk me through, what is the process that you set up various kinds of profiles? And they said, okay, here's what we can do. And individual schools can control the titles that are being added, but they can't filter, as was pointed out, all of the things that PDF, that picture of the page might have had a link to. Okay? So it doesn't take you out to it, but yeah. So what we found is I asked EBSCO, do you have a list of all of the search terms that students are actually using? And you heard what students could find. And so I got a chance to review with them the confidential list of the top 100 search terms. And the search terms that I saw were things like, what do students search for? Global warming, abortion, gun control, bullying, the death penalty, animal testing, cyberbullying, depression, immigration. These are the topics that show up every day in the news and consequently make it their way to student assignments. So what librarians are trying to do is to say, here is vetted authoritative information from mainstream media, and you're not going to get the whole wildness of the internet, and here's what's being written about these subjects. And the positive thing to note, the proportional thing to recognize here, is the vast proportion of what students look for is exactly what you would hope they would look for. They're doing the same research that they used to do with print, but now they're doing it far more efficiently and effectively electronically. So why, it is undoubtedly the case that there are some teenagers who are searching for sexual content on the internet, no doubt about it. but they're not starting with library databases. If you're going to look for sex, you're starting with Google, and you're not going to a library database because that's just not what they're targeting. That's not what they're trying to provide. They are providing educational resources without which our Colorado schools would be in a lot of trouble. So why then do we have such a false and alarmist claims? And so as I was trying to research this, it turns out that most of this attack against library digital content is the work of a group once known as Morality in Media, a faith-based, largely Catholic group dedicated to removing sexual content from media. In 2015, they changed their name to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE, but their claims and their focus have not changed. Since 2015, they've also done an annual Dirty Dozen list of nasty corporate customers. The American Library Association has made its appearance on that list. EBSCO has made the appearance. Other past winners include the United States Department of Justice, Amazon, and Twitter. So that's the company we keep. In 2017 and 18, after the first challenge in Cherry Creek, dozens of school and public libraries in Colorado received challenges to these databases, and mostly on Facebook. These challenges came from individuals using the same inflammatory language of this NCOSE website at a time when we're still discovering the sexual exploitation of thousands of children by priests in America alone. One wonders why an organization with largely Catholic leadership would challenge library databases as an issue. So the answer, why did they do this, I think is threefold. The first one is the hope by having these kinds of charges, librarians are pushing pornography, is to gain publicity for NCOSE's agenda. Libraries push porn as a lie, but it has a kind of a man bites dog sort of feel to it. It's clickbait. And so people say, it's fearful. I better find out what's going on with that. NCOSE is really pushing an agenda that attempts to frame all sexual content very, very broadly as pornographic and as obscene, when in fact that is not the case. Their target remains almost all media where any sexual content is by definition dangerous. The second thing, and I think we've kind of skipped over this, that Colorado publicly funded school and public libraries we know are already required to have filtering software. But it parallels federal law, and what CIPA, that Children's Internet Protection Act, says. What is being filtered is sexual imagery only. Imagery. The big shift in this bill is it attempts to push filtering of a sort that has never before been the case in Colorado, and that's the filtering of text. And so that's a huge shift and a fundamental challenge to the First Amendment. In much the same way, the ability to do private actions against public entities, taken together, these things do in fact constitute censorship, an attempt on the part of government to restrict access to the speech, mainstream media. And third, I think, and I also believe that watching the way that this began to spread around the Northwest, the Southeast, and other libraries, is it went very quickly from school libraries to public libraries, who have also been approached by the group that you heard, Pine. And so I think that this is the nose under the tent. I think this is really this is not just an attempt that is common sense. This is a radical attempt to impose new censorship on America's writing. And third, I think the clear intent of Senate Bill 48 is to promote the classic chilling effect. Is EBSCO or a particular school district going to be found in violation of obscenity laws? No, of course not. That is not going to happen. But the threat of a lawsuit, as we heard, is often enough to cow public schools. And indeed, dozens of schools across the United States have abruptly and without regard to their own policies or evidence dropped their electronic subscriptions after having these charges brought against them on social media. So what did they replace EBSCO with? You heard one is Gale, which doesn't have quite the same size as EBSCO, which is why it's easier to restrict it, or ProQuest. But NCOSE has also challenged those, also has led attacks against those on their website. So EBSCO was not the only issue that we're talking about. So more often, EBSCO is replaced with nothing. This does nothing in the public interest. It simply removes content from student research. So in conclusion, I think what I want everyone here to know is that librarians continue to do their very best to educate the public about the thoughtful, discerning use of information from vetted sources rather than from random websites. And the forces of censorship, such as those behind this bill, I believe, seek instead to cudgel public entities into compliance with private religious agendas. America's students are not reading and researching too much. Ignorance and censorship should not be educational objectives in our state, and I urge you to reject this bill. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue. So you've been sitting here throughout the afternoon and heard the witnesses testify from Lamar, yes, and you heard testimony from witnesses here describing what seemed to be broad-based access to pornography at schools, and that it was based on searching the EBSCO websites or the EBSCO platform. How do you respond to that? I mean, we're getting two different views of the world.
The easiest way to do this is to try it. It really is to try it. And what I have learned is that when I've watched some of the videos where people say, see what we found on EBSCO. Well, the things that they found on EBSCO were not by any legal definition obscene. They might have been more graphic sexual content, but that link is only possible outside of the school filtering system because it's not part of EBSCO. Let's say, for instance, is it a legitimate topic to say, what is the effect of pornography on sexual violence? Okay, is that a legitimate research question for a high school student? Sure. Yes, it is. And so you would do research, and it might say, if you go to Pornhub.com, well, now someone says, see, Pornhub.com, that's an explicit link, and if I click on that, there I am. Well, that's not what EBSCO was providing. They were providing a meta discussion about the topic. They weren't providing live links to everything that's being discussed. So I think that, again, as I listen to people, it's like, it's a very complicated subject. Lots of issues to be sorted through, but just because you find something that you object to as age inappropriate on the internet doesn't mean that it was pushed to you by EBSCO, nor does it mean that it's obscene.
So are you troubled by some of the language in the bill that talks about things that are, quote, harmful to children?
Yes, again, to repeat this, there are no findings of harm to children from EBSCO, none, nor are there liable to be.
And the bill uses such terms as obscene as creating a grounds for liability.
Yes.
How do we respond to that? I mean, clearly we
take it to court. Excuse me for jumping in.
That's all right, go ahead.
But let's take that to court because I believe that the claims are so outrageous that they cannot withstand scrutiny.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Saying none. Thank you, Mr. LaRue, for your testimony. Thanks for your patience in staying with us. Tammy Sales? Good afternoon, Ms. Sales. Thanks for staying with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
My name is Tammy Sales, and I am the president of the Colorado Association of Libraries. And I am here today to express our opposition to Senate Bill 48. The Colorado Association of Libraries membership consists of librarians, library employees, and institutions from public, academic, special, and school libraries. We are opposed to the passage of Senate Bill 48 because school districts are already required to filter their online databases. Schools and school librarians are tailoring the titles included in the databases to match their curriculum and policies. In schools without librarians, databases are the only way to access professionally vetted selected materials. And finally, it deprives the local school boards of their authority to make decisions about which digital resources meets their community's curricular needs, undermining local control. Having access to databases is essential to a K-12 student's success. Students learn to navigate the digital materials included in the databases and evaluate them to determine if they meet their research needs. Students' ability to utilize a database resource in school ensures their success when they enter the higher education system. Once they've entered that higher education system, they'll be required to utilize those databases for their research needs. They need to be familiar with how to use those. If database access is limited or removed entirely, K-12 students will be forced to use the internet, which is not curated, not designed for appropriate age level, and certainly contains false information. Our students deserve to have access to the best possible research tools which provide accurate and fact-based information. As you know, and we've talked about several times, the Colorado state statute requires public schools to adopt and enforce reasonable policies of internet safety that will protect children from obtaining harmful materials. Our schools and our school librarians are doing this. We are selecting titles and content accessible in their databases based on the curricular needs of their students. Our school boards, our school administration, and school librarians should be allowed to determine their informational needs for their own school community without fear of civil action. For these reasons, the Colorado Association of Libraries respectfully request that you oppose Senate Bill 48. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sales, for your testimony. Are there questions? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony on behalf of the Library Association. I am curious, so one option is to utilize a curated database such as EBSCO or any of the others that currently exist. A second option would be to use the World Wide Web unfiltered. A third option would be to not use the internet. I'm curious if those are the options available. What types, and I'm assuming that you may, but maybe that is an assumption on my part. Do you provide patrons within your library or schools that that utilize these types of databases? Do you provide, resources, how to be a savvy consumer of data, how to be a well-educated internet navigator that is age appropriate? And if so, can you share a little bit about what that looks like?
Ms. Sales.
Yes, we can. I can share some. I am a public librarian. I am not a school librarian. But for us, we do have a homework help tab on the public library site. And how that works is we have databases at the public library. We use them. And one of the best benefits of having database access is the extensive knowledge that we are able to reach at our fingertips. And so with that, as librarians, we curate some of those websites. We review them, we look at their content, and if we recommend an actual website that's outside of a database, then we've looked at that. But if a student decides to leave that site, then that student has made that decision to go further down. And then again, they're still on the internet, on the World Wide Web.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Sales. Appreciate your participation in our discussions. Jackson Sharp. Thank you, Mr. Sharp, for joining us. We appreciate, again, your patience as well. So,
thank you, Senators and Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Tell us what you want us to know.
So I'm here today, or this evening.
It is evening now.
Yes. I'm here this evening to urge you all to vote against Senate Bill 48. And I'm actually a freshman at Denver East High School. So I'm hoping that I can use my testimony to talk about how this law will affect students and myself. And I also would like to provide information about what is going on the ground.
Thank you. You seem to be a consumer of educational materials. So
thank you.
Give us your insights.
Of course. As a student, I'm extremely concerned that my online resources could grow even more limited, and that's what this bill will lead to. This is very important to me because not only am I a high school student, I also participate in debate where online resources are critical. In my experience, online responsibility is spreading like wildfire, not harmful content. This, in my opinion, is not the devastating problem it has been labeled as. And I also would like to address that the closest I've ever seen to someone who I've gone to school with breaching firewalls is my friend signing into a different Google account. And basically he was hoping, oh, maybe I could get around that somehow. And to his surprise, he was met with the same exact restrictions, because that's how this database works, at least at the schools that I've been at. I would also like to mention that navigating the online world is a large part of everyday adult life, and that these restrictions would set me and other students up for failure if I am prevented from doing so. Not only is this critical for college readiness, but it is of the utmost importance for my future employment, and for other students' future employment, of course. The final point I would like to bring to your attention today is the impact restricted resources has on students like me. As I mentioned, I'm a debate student. It is extremely common for me to be searching for a source in a school, and the one video I need is blocked. This occurs far more frequently than you may realize, and further restrictions will undoubtedly result in exacerbating this issue. It seems to me this would be extremely counterproductive if access to knowledge is further limited in schools. I would like to reiterate that Senate Bill 48 will result in limited access to critical online resources that Colorado students like me need. I urge you respectfully to vote no on Senate Bill 48. Thank you, Senators, for your time and your attention.
Well, Mr. Sharp, thank you for sharing your opinions on this with us. I think it is rare for students, particularly freshmen, to come before this committee, and certainly to come with such well planned out thoughts and articulate description of your views. So thank you very much, and I suspect at one day you may be sitting on this side of the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sharp? Okay, well, thank you again, and come back frequently and tell us your views on other bills.
Sounds good. I'd love to do that.
Okay. Are there other witnesses? Tristan Gorman, thank you for joining us. Is that it? Good. Well, the baseball metaphor would be you're the cleanup hitter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tristan Gorman. Thank you, Senator. My name is Tristan Gorman. I represent the Colorado Criminal Defense Bar. I am going to limit my comments on this bill to that scope in an effort to not take up too much more time. So when I read this bill, I had a lot of concerns in the civil realm, but what struck me from the perspective of a criminal defense lawyer is that the situation that this civil action and then the affirmative defense that a company like EBSCO would have to avail itself of actually creates a paper trail in court records that amounts to a confession by the child to cybercrime. And the likelihood of that prosecution could be debated, but again, thinking as a criminal defense attorney, I don't think that the parent or legal guardian who would be bringing the civil action in order to protect their children from this material would be intending those types of consequences, that you're basically putting your child's admission to a criminal act into court records, even if that is in civil court. So I'm just going to read a few excerpts from the cybercrime statute to illustrate what I mean, and keeping in mind that the filter or device that would have to be installed by the company providing these digital materials to the school district could be considered part of a computer network or computer system. So from Colorado Revised Statutes 18.5.5, 102, subsection 1, a person is guilty of cybercrime if that person knowingly, subsection A, exceeds authorized access to a computer, computer network, or computer system, or any part thereof, or uses a computer, computer network, or computer system, or any part thereof in excess of authorized access. Subsection B, knowingly accesses any computer, computer network, or computer system, or any part thereof for the purpose of devising or executing any scheme or artifice to defraud, such as to get around a firewall or hack into or out of a system. Subsection C, accesses any computer, computer network, or computer system or any part thereof to obtain by means of false or fraudulent pretenses, services, passwords, or similar information through which a computer, computer network, or computer system or any part thereof may be accessed. Subsection E, in excess of authorized access, alters, damages, interrupts, or causes the interruption or impairment of the proper functioning of any computer, computer network, computer system, computer software, program, application, documentation, or data contained in such computer, computer network, or computer system or any part thereof. And finally, subsection F, causes the transmission of a computer program, software, information, code, data, or command by means of a computer, computer network, or computer system or any part thereof with the intent to cause the interruption or impairment of the proper functioning of, or that actually causes the interruption or impairment of the proper functioning of any computer, computer network, computer system, or part thereof. So my concern here, Mr. Chair, is unintended consequences where the best of intentions in the civil realm could actually provide evidence for and open up a child to criminal prosecution under Title 18.
Okay. Mr. Gorman, I probably thought you were going to go down a different path, and it had to do with some of the definitions and overbroad and vagueness and concerns about civil liability. And do you want to share your thoughts on that? Because I know you have some.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I was trying to limit the time for my testimony. I do have concerns that these definitions are overbroad, particularly in the realm of the definition of harmful to children and the definition of obscene. I think there may be some unintended consequences in that realm as well. First off, I think that one of the prior witnesses in opposition made a very good point as to this bill being such a departure because it would require filtering of text, of descriptions, not just of visual imagery or actual depictions, but just the text. And I certainly would not want to see a bill like this used to expand those types of definitions in criminal statutes. I think that could have some disastrous consequences. And as far as the harmful to children definition, there is not yet a legal definition of that. And I think that even this definition that the bill puts forward, that quality of any description or representation, again, visual imagery, text, in whatever form, so it could be a form that we haven't even thought of here today, and then it gives 4 different categories that could fall into, and definitions about prurient interest. That's problematic for several reasons, and there's been a lot of First Amendment litigation on that subject. But another thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is in the definition section on page 2 of the bill, sub 2A, lines 13 and 14. Taken as a whole, predominantly appeals to the prurient interest in sex of children. This may be nitpicking, but I certainly read that syntax a lot differently than I would read the prurient interest of children in sex. So to me, that also opens up some questions about whether we're getting into another criminal area of sexual exploitation of children or internet luring by defining it that way. And as you may know, the sexual exploitation of a child for possession of pornographic images, that's not limited to defendants who are over the age of 18. It can also apply to juveniles or minors, again, the population that this bill seeks to protect.
Right. Okay. Okay, well, thanks for going down that avenue with me. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. And again, thanks for your patience and staying with us.
Thank you.
Are there any other witnesses who would like to testify in support or in opposition to this bill? Seeing none, the testimony phase is concluded. Are there any amendments, Senator Holbert?
I believe there might be one.
Senator Gardner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me hand this amendment to Ms. Jensen.
You want to turn your mic on there?
No? When you're the chair, you have to leave it on all the time, so you forget how to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L002, which is being distributed this time, and I actually would yield to the sponsor, Senator Holbert, to explain the amendment and the rationale.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L002 seeks to narrow the scope of the bill to curated entities that provide curated database services. The early testimony talked about internet service providers. That was outside the intent of the bill, and L002 seeks to narrow that scope down to entities such as EBSCO or Gale who provide the curated database.
I'm struggling with what you've done here. An entity that provides a public school or school district with, and then it says strike line 14 substitute, but that seems to be the same language. An electronically accessible I got it. You added the word curated. Okay, thank you. It took me a minute. Any comments on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments? Seeing none, the amendment phase is concluded. Is there a motion for the bill? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 48 as amended to the Committee of the Whole with a very favorable recommendation.
Any comments on the bill? Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, being a millennial, with my generation of students was the first to have computers placed in our schools, and I do have a lot of concerns with the bill, even as amended. In addition to the concerns raised by Ms. Gorman in her testimony, I do want to also note that on page 3, line 24, homosexuality being an act of sexual conduct, and I would just point my colleagues to this idea that homosexuality in and of itself is not an act of sexual conduct. Then later, the definitions around sadomasochistic abuse, I actually went and looked up such term on the Googles and found Jesus on the cross as part of one of those definitions in the first 2 pages. I do have deep concerns around the definitions that continue to be a part of this bill, and found the Douglas County Librarian's testimony and Mr. Sharp's testimony to be particularly compelling, because I do think that we should be doing the work to ask our students to think critically about the internet world that they navigate on the daily basis. And so for those reasons, I will be a no vote.
Any further comments? Senator Holbert, do you want to make a closing?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your patience this afternoon. This is a challenging discussion. Again, I go back to when I was invited to the meeting over the interim. I truly went there to explain why we couldn't really do anything, why this is more a decision of a school board in Colorado. But after listening to some of the folks that you heard this afternoon, seeing some of the examples, I said, okay, let's try. We've tried. So thank you for hearing the bill.
Okay, very good. Ms. Jensen, please poll the committee.
Senator Cook.
Aye.
Senator Gardner.
Aye.
Senator Rodriguez.
No.
Senator Gonzalez.
No.
Mr. Chair.
No. The bill fails on a vote of 3-2. Thank you very much for presenting your bill. The committee will take a recess until...
You want to do another motion?
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that this bill be postponed indefinitely.
Senator Gardner, help me out.
I'd like to make a substitute motion, Mr. Chair, that the bill be postponed indefinitely on a reverse roll call vote.
Thank you, former chair, for guiding the new chair. Appreciate it. So do we vote on that one?
No, there's no objection.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. Seeing no objection, Senator Gardner's motion is passed. Okay. So we'll adjourn until 6 o'clock. We have a